So today on the show, I have Chris Bishop, our newest member of Signature Real Estate, our new general manager of the Signature Real Estate Group here in Las Vegas, and the managing broker of the Southwest office. How you doing today, Chris?
Very good, Brandon. How are you?
Welcome to the Signature Life Podcast, where we sit down with Signature real estate agents with a shared conviction that moving towards things we want in life starts with the choices we make today. We're creating an ever-evolving culture for those who wish to participate in a larger mission to help others achieve their full potential and a signature life.
So you've been in Vegas how long?
All my life.
Born and raised,
1983. Yeah.
Wow. You're just going to answer the questions direct, aren't you?
Yeah,
Shut it
pretty
right
truthfully. Yeah, no, I born and raised in Las Vegas. My dad was here since like the late 50s, went to Las Vegas High School, like the first graduating class. Mm-hmm. And my grandfather came here after the war and opened the Stardust Hotel and died a year still working there before it closed.
Wow.
Yeah, 47 years. Only employee that worked there that long.
So you've seen this town change from desert to a thriving city.
Yeah, I remember when Lone Mountain, not that I can say it was that long ago, but I remember when Lone Mountain, you had to drive over the freeway, like through the traffic to get to the other side, and it was a dirt road. And the Santa Fe station wasn't even built yet. So, I mean, that was far out then. You used to ride your horses out there.
Yeah, it's still far out.
I actually grew up in the old Hunt Ridge section, which is the oldest subdivision in Las Vegas. And my grandparents bought their home there when it was probably only 800 square feet. And by the time they passed away in 2006, when they sold it, it was 3,100 square feet. They were horrible real estate clients, but the idea of their generation was you would just expand your home instead of buy a new one because they love the location.
Whereabouts is that in town?
It's right there, Maryland and Oakey.
Okay.
St. Louis also, it's that whole track right there in between. I actually went to a small private school called Trinity Christian, which was right over off of St. Louis. And me and probably about 13 of my friends went from first grade to 12th grade all the way together. So it was kind of one of those small town type feelings, but it was a really cool school.
Right, and you grew up son of a realtor.
Son of a realtor. So both my mom and my stepdad, Keith, are both realtors, still practicing. They were both past presidents of the Board of Realtors. Most people don't know we're related because they have a different last name. So yeah, I'm part of the Kelly dynasty. Mm-hmm. And my grandmother on both sides actually had the real estate license. So I could say if I wanted to, I'm a third generation realtor, but only two of generations sold houses.
Okay. And you, how long have you had your license?
I got my license in 2005, but I started working for a real estate company. It's kind of a funny story. I was working for Wells Fargo, and I remember my mom called me up the day I graduated high school, and I was actually at passed out after a party at the pastor's house. I hope that he doesn't see the podcast, but she called me up. She says, "So you graduated high school? Get a job." And I said, "Well, I just graduated yesterday." She said, "I don't care. Get up and go get a job." And so the first opportunity I had was to work for Wells Fargo at a bank. Funny enough, the guy I worked with, who trained me into Wells Fargo, ended up purchasing Capriotti's. And I guess he made the right decision. And so it worked out really well for him. But I worked there about 10 months. I absolutely hated it. It was just a very mundane job. It was hard to come in every day. It wasn't really that exciting, even though it was pretty good work and a pretty good pay. And my mom at the time was the general manager of a real estate company. And she said, "Have you thought about real estate?" And I was like, "No." I was still going to UNLV, and I was actually going to be a political science major and go to law school. And she says, "Well, they're hiring for a recruiting assistant that would support me in my job, but I can't hire you. You have to go and interview with someone that doesn't know either one of us. And if they hire you, then I'll give you the job." And so I did. And miraculously, they gave it to me.
Gave it to you. And
so I started as a recruiting assistant, and then I moved up to be an escrow assistant. And that's how I met my wife, who was the escrow manager for the company. It worked perfectly. We worked at the same place. And then I moved over to agent services, which handled basically generating the listings in the office, putting them in the system, putting them in the MLS, doing all the photo work and stuff. And then I actually moved into the accounting department and was the accounting person for the company. And so I would sit there and write out pretty hefty checks. And I thought, wow, if these agents can make this kind of money, what am I sitting here trying to earn $40,000, $50,000 a year? And so I jumped in 2005, went to real estate school, Randy Van Rieken School. I think it was called Southern Nevada School of Real Estate then.
Okay.
And I got my license on the first try, which is pretty amazing. And it doesn't matter what score you got because no one sees it on the license, but I passed and jumped into the business. And my first year, I sold 10 houses and I made $115,000. And so it was really good, but at 21 years old, it was really bad. I learned a lot of hard lessons the hard way.
Spent a lot of money.
I spent a lot of money on things I didn't need, cars that no one has anymore. And I learned a lot because it wasn't that hard to generate good clients that cared about you and that would give you return business. Out of the 8 or 9 first-year clients I had, one lady I sold 3 homes to in the following 2 years. And it was only because I found out that if you keep really good touch with your clients and you actually care about them as people and you're just real with them, they're going to come back to you time and time again. And it's the truth.
Yeah. And so you came in, you sold your first year by yourself.
Yeah.
Then you joined a team.
Let me dispel some rumors about that, because what was interesting is my parents, my mom was the general manager of the company, and my dad ran a very successful team. And at that company, you couldn't actually be a brand new agent for the company. You had to go through a mentor program. And so just like everybody else, I went through the program, but I got asked to kind of help with all of the stuff because my knowledge was the inside of the business, the staff side. And so they offered me a job to basically help run the team. And my initial split was 10%. And when you're making an hourly wage of like $10 an hour and you hear 10%, you're like, oh, that's not very much. Well, 10% of a 100, 200 deals a year from a team is pretty massive.
Yeah.
And so I got in there, worked like as hard as I could, and I of course did my own transactions, but I had to learn my way through the business. My parents figured that you really had to jump in and be part of that and get your feet wet. And so it wasn't easy. It was definitely a little bit harder than it probably could have been, but it was worth it. And after that, the following years, business was pretty good. And then 2006, the market crashed. But the weird thing was I didn't know any different because I hadn't been in it long enough. Mm-hmm. And I always go by the ideology that every year 30 to 40,000 homes sell in Las Vegas. That's whether the market's up or if the market's down. And the question is, are you going to get your market share? And so I found that out the hard way. I mean, it was so bad at one point. I remember in 2009 that I didn't really care anymore about the house or the price. Mm-hmm. I had a minimum commission, and it was about selling that. Didn't matter if it was a condo for $10,000 or a luxury home for $650, and that was luxury.
Yeah, that was a time I moved here in 2008. Mm-hmm. In the downturn, and it was interesting because when I got my license way back in '96, the prices that were out here during that period of time, that's what I got into.
Sure.
So I was really used to that. Back then, I remember when I sold a $200,000 home, I thought I hit a jackpot.
Yeah, exactly.
But when you came out here, you mentioned that there are you still have the number of sales. The only difference is the
market
price goes down and the commissions are different, and that puts a lot of people in a bind.
I think the whole thing is that a lot of agents have lost the idea that they provide a value. They provide a service to a client that's truly invaluable. And I think that they allow the marketplace, the market statistics. You always kind of hear this Chicken Little mentality that the market's always falling, right? I can't remember a time, regardless of the year we were in or what was going on or how good or how bad it was, I always heard the negative. And I think that agents a lot of times believe the things that they hear, and so they're willing to discount themselves and their self-value. And so I kind of learned early on that, I bring a lot of value to the transaction. My knowledge and expertise, even though I was brand new, was the fact that I was going to jump in and make it happen. I mean, if you wanted to buy a house and you could qualify, there was nothing that was going to stop me from helping you get there. And I think that has a value. And we've all heard the ideology. It's like going to a doctor, do you want a veterinarian to do brain surgery on you? Well, I don't know. I haven't seen his pricing yet. but the whole idea is that it's different, and it's different for people based on their point of view. And I think the hardest thing for agents to learn right now is that they have a tremendous value. You look at pretty much every agent I've ever hired into the business, they didn't start out as real estate agents. They came from some other field that they were in and something led them here, but they provided a lot of value from their previous career.
Right.
And I think that I think more people need to understand what their value is before they try to sell real estate.
Okay, and so during that downturn, I mean, what did you focus on? Did you go after the short sales and the REO?
I actually had an REO contract, and so it was kind of cool because you'd come into the office and, like every other real estate agent, check your email first. And I checked my email, there'd be a listing in there. And, it kind of gave you a false sense of reality. But you go to these properties, and I mean, I can't tell you the horrific things that I would see. And just the sad point that everyone was at. And it really didn't matter. I mean, it wasn't like there were some people that were foreclosed on or some people that lost their home. I mean, 80%. And you just learned to deal with it.
Kind of became the norm.
It became the norm. And I like doing REOs. They were a specific set of tasks with a specific outcome, but that wasn't the marketplace. Short sales started in. And I remember I never even really had heard the term, even though I understood what it meant. It was kind of unspoken. Mm-hmm. And I actually partnered up with a guy who knew short sales in and out. And I realized that I had to evolve or I was going to not make it. And I didn't want to go back to school, and I didn't want to go do anything else. I didn't want to deal cards. So I figured I got to learn. And so I learned how to do short sales from him. He learned to do REOs from me. And we started to build a traditional business again. And that's ironic, is a lot of the REO and short sale guys that did it as a primary business, they're gone.
Yeah.
And it's because they never learned to evolve back into traditional sales. And if you think of that right now, 50% of the agents in the market right now that are selling real estate have never been in a marketplace where it wasn't distressed. And so they don't even understand to sell in a traditional market. And that's a scary thought.
That is scary. I never really even put that together. You look at that. So, yeah, I mean, if we hit that same downturn, they wouldn't even know what to do.
Yeah, they wouldn't. And I think the scary part for them was it probably would be easy for them to have a downturn. What's hard for them is to have a home that has to be marketed for longer than 3 months.
Right.
Because they're not prepared for it. They're not sustainable for it yet. I mean, I remember having to carry, 10 or 12 listings minimum just to be able to sustain a monthly income because you knew a property wouldn't sell for a while. There was a time when a luxury home would take 19 to 25 months just to be able to sell because there were so many and no one was buying luxury homes. But now that's a traditional home, is going to take 3 to 6 months, and especially if it's priced well, and then you see the properties that are out there that even now they're overpriced.
Yeah, I love it when an agent goes, this home hasn't sold. And I say, how long has it been on the market? 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
It's like...
and I think it all comes back to the value that you as an agent bring to the table, and when you're sitting in front of the seller, regardless of your commission or what you charge. But if you list a home that's overpriced, did you do yourself a service or a disservice? And there's some listings not meant to be taken. There's some sellers not ready to be sold. And I think the idea is if you can't get them to where they need to be, then probably your best answer is to get up and leave because there's another listing down the street.
Right.
It's just that it's so hard for people to get up and find the next listing when they already have that one there.
Well, it's, agents now, the market's less forgiving. And what I mean by that is when the market was climbing and the prices were going up, it was easy to overprice a home because the market would catch it and you'd be able to sell it. So you thought you were great.
Yep.
And now if you overprice it, it sits.
Yeah, it does.
And
it's stagnant, and people notice that. I mean, I've seen more astute sellers now and buyers actually ask questions like, how long has the home been on the market? Do you think they'll take less? I usually like to answer that question because you always get a buyer that comes in and say, oh man, do you think I can offer them less? And I said, we just sold your house. And every time a buyer offered you less, you said no. So why is it now you feel that some sellers just can miraculously take less?
Right.
And it usually just have to put it in the perspective that they understand, and people are real, they get it.
Yeah. What do you think is the toughest thing agents are having to deal with in today's market?
Today's market. Well, we're back to what we'd call traditional market. And everyone's been talking about the fact that there's marketing timeframes that make sense. And I think that agents have a struggle with the fact that they've got to present value. And it comes back to my previous comments that they don't understand the value they bring to the table, so they have a hard time selling any value. And when you're sitting in front of a seller, if you can't answer the question, why should I pick you? You probably aren't going to get the listing. And I think the question, if it was posed to me, why would I pick you, Chris, to be my agent? Because there's no one that's going to work harder than I am every single day to get your house sold.
Right.
And if you can't say that, come up with something. I think that people forget that in front of our license, it says salesman. And we have to have the ability to sell something. And I think that the idea is we're selling us because there are 15,000 of us to pick from. And I think that, you have to be ready to answer that question. So I think that's the hardest thing they face.
Yeah, just getting out of their own way.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, I think, with the market being easy, they don't know how to service things. They haven't perfected a listing presentation. They didn't have to work really to get these listings, and now all of a sudden they do.
I remember for years my listing presentation was the stat sheet that just showed the comps for their neighborhood and the contract.
Right.
And I was considered reasonably successful. And I think then I've seen listing presentations that are hundreds of pages. I don't think anyone should ever sit in front of a seller and force them to look at anything. but they should be ready to answer objections, right? I mean, that's the whole idea of a presentation, is that if I present well before we even get to the property, I can eliminate your objections. And if I eliminate your objections, the first thing I should do when I walk in is say, you're ready to sign the contract. And in my time of coaching, most of the time agents fail to ask that one question, are you ready to sign the contract?
Well, they fail to ask a lot of questions.
Yeah, that's true too.
I mean, even to why are you thinking about moving?
Yeah.
If you were to move, where are you going to go?
Yep.
So they don't understand the motivation. If you
True.
don't know the motivation, you can't present a solution.
And when you think about answers to objections, motivation is the most powerful thing you can answer the question with. It's not my fault their house isn't worth what they thought it was. It's not my fault that they bought a house and now they have to relocate. I'm just providing a service. It's like my dentist isn't upset that I got a cavity. It's not his fault. It's my fault.
Mm-hmm.
But he's going to fix it, and I'm going to pay him to fix it. And I think that in the real estate terms, that when we go into a seller's home, agents are such loving, kind people that they want to take responsibility for all of their seller's issues, right? There's no way anyone can do that. And I think that a lot of times they need to understand it's not their fault. And you're just providing that service. And their motivation of, I want to get to this place, or I want to stop the bleeding of money to a house I can't afford, or I need to relocate so I'm closer to work, that's their motivation. Let them have it. Don't take ownership of problems that aren't yours.
Yeah. So why should somebody move to Vegas?
Vegas is an amazing city. And I can say, honestly, there are things in Vegas, and I'm not talking about casinos and everything else that, people, what happens here stays here, but I mean just an incredible community. And it's full of so much love, and people that live here for long periods of time. Now, it does get hot, but we don't have usually national catastrophes or destruction of, flooding and things like that. Of course, we've had some flooding, but it's way better than it was when I was a kid. We used to have this guy down the street that had a rowboat, and when it would flood, he would get the rowboat out and he would row his boat down around the street because it was that bad, right? But that doesn't happen anymore. But Vegas just has the nightlife, it has the economy, it has the sports teams for those that love it. You can see a show about anything. I mean, there's just nothing you can't do. And a lot of people don't realize that it's such a massive community. I mean, you have multiple cities now that when I was a kid, you could see the difference between Henderson and Las Vegas, or between North Las Vegas and Las Vegas. But now they just flow together. And pretty much if you're into it or you enjoy it, it's here. And you can't say that about a lot of cities.
Right. And so what do you do for fun in Vegas?
Oh, I love the local places. I love going to restaurants that, have been here forever. I love, just going to that family atmosphere around the city. And I like the nightlife. I enjoy, the local movie theaters and places that, I remember being a kid here in town. It kind of sucked because you couldn't go anywhere after midnight. You couldn't go anywhere after 10 o'clock because they'd kind of harass you, but we'd ride up and down the strip. We do that for about an hour, and then we'd get out of our car and we'd walk up and down the strip, and we do that for about an hour. And about all that you could go to then was a pool hall, and then they'd kick you out of that place. But now, I mean, there's just so much for families to do. There's hiking and things like that. I'm not an avid hiker, but I just love the view of the valley. Yeah.
What's your hobby?
My hobby. Well, I collect a lot of stuff, believe it or not. Antiques, coins, sports memorabilia. I'm not a massive sports fan, but for some reason growing up as a kid, my grandfather always collected that stuff. And so it kind of led me to do the same thing. My hobby's real estate. Literally every member of my family is in real estate. And I just enjoy what I do. And so it's probably my hobby, my job, my passion. Believe it or not, I serve in a lot of board positions still. I think at one time I counted I was on like 10 committees and multiple board seats, but I love everything to do with this industry, and that's pretty much my
and it comes
hobby.
Through.
Yeah,
it comes through. But you still got to have a life outside of real estate.
I need to get a life.
Right.
I need to get a life. But I just I do a lot of travel with the board of realtors. I have for years, and so my wife and I were joking the other day. Someday we need to make time to go on a vacation that's not real estate related. And it's true because that's our vacations, at least for the last 10 years it has been. But there's just, my daughter Madison kind of dictates what we do. I'm a homebody. I love to stay at home and watch movies. I'm a Netflix fanatic, we love to do that. And, my family's pretty much it.
That's awesome. Do you got, so your mom and Keith, your stepdad, have also been big in the boards.
They have. We're the only family that we know of in the nation in the real estate arena that has had a mother and father and a son all be local and state presidents. There's been a lot of husband and wives, even in our board, that have been local and state presidents. And my dad was actually an RVP, a regional vice president, over 6 states. And I have to kind of make the decision, am I going to pursue that? You actually can't be the national president unless you've been an RVP. So if I want to go any further in that group, and I'm young enough to be able to do it if I chose to, and I have a lot of good support. But I don't know yet.
You don't know yet.
I'll see how my boss thinks about it.
2018, you were the president of GLVAR.
Yeah.
And this year, 2020, you're president of NVR.
Sure.
Nevada Association of Realtors.
So a lot of people ask me the question, how do I get involved? Why did you plan to do this? I had no intention at all of ever doing this at all. I remember when my mom was president of the board back in 2008, I was lucky enough that she actually appointed me to a committee. It was the scholarship committee then. And most people don't know, but GLVAR offers a scholarship for members that are involved in the board, that have served on committees, not only for education for members, but also for your children to be able to go off to college. And it's a pretty nice little scholarship that will help for books, and they do it per semester. And so that was the first committee I got on. And then, like every good member, I started getting on more than one. And I actually remember I wanted to run for the MLS board because I figured as a practitioner, the MLS held the biggest tool that I would use, because I didn't really know all the things the board did. And I ran against, I think it was Walt Coffey, and I lost. And the funny part was, it wasn't like an election, it was like a selection. You went into interview with the group, and I was all of like, I was in my 20s, so I was probably like 24 or 25, and I didn't get it. And so I was kind of, butthurt, and I said, okay, well, on to the next thing. Well, a week later, they were having the board elections, and I had enough time to put in my application, and miraculously, I qualified for the position, and I won. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, I was shocked, and I got on the board, and to the MLS group, but I got to know them all and really value them, and that's where we met. And it's a great, best thing I've ever done in my real estate career. It really was a thing that uplifted me, gave me a lot of value for the time I put in. I got to know most of the brokers in the Valley, a lot of the agents in the Valley. It helped tremendously with my own business and with helping with my agents, and it was a great step. And then I found out all the things the board does, and I just kept kind of progressing through, and the next step and the next step, and I was treasurer of the board, and I ran for vice president and lost. And then I ran for vice president again and won. And then I had a pretty contested election, won by 8 votes for president-elect. And because every vote does matter.
And now you just destroy everyone in every election.
Oh, yeah, right. Well, the funny part is now there are no more elections, because once you move to the state level, it's no longer the membership that votes on it. It's the state board elected by the group they vote. So it's actually harder to get 36 people to vote for you than to get 1,000 or 2,000 in the general election, because they have a longer history with you. There's a lot of people that you're running against that all are friends together or know of each other together, and it makes for tough elections. But now I'm on that, and I'm continuing to serve as a national director. I have for about 7 years. I get one more, actually 2 more years of that. State president, and then state past president gets to serve. And then I don't know where I'll go from there.
RVP.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
So you ran, you go back to kind of the real estate thing. You worked with a guy, learned some short sales, did REO. After that, did you go directly into management, or?
No. So let me step back to that. So that was probably one of the most important learning experiences of my real estate career. Gentleman by the name of Todd Barton and I partnered together, and we made the Barton Bishop Group at a Keller Williams office. And it was a pretty dynamic learning experience, because, with short sales, you had to have a lot of staff to manage those short sales. REOs were a little bit easier. They were going to close in 30 days. You just had to get them trashed out and, manage them. But we assembled a team. We had about 3 buyer's agents. We had 3 admins. So you had a payroll you had to meet. You had overhead for the production of the office. There were a lot of things that we had to pay out to earn capital, and just like a real business. And so we were doing about 140, 150 transactions a year at an average sales price of $118,000. So it was important about the minimum commission and about understanding the value and training others on how to pull that value in. And It kind of taught me how to build a support group in the business and how to manage a business. And I think that one of the other things that agents struggle with is they don't treat their business like a business. If I open a Subway tomorrow, I would not run it like my real estate business because I'd want it to be profitable.
Right.
And a lot of agents just look at it like they don't think of it as a profitable business. They don't look at it as a business expense or a business cost. And I think I got that from that. And then after that, I don't know why, but I decided I wanted to get into property management. And so I went and got my property management permit and did that for a little while with my own family business. And then got a phone call one day from a mentor of mine, Devin Reese, who I highly respect, a great guy in the business, also a real estate family, very well known. And he said, "Hey, let's go to lunch." Then he want to ask you that question, let's go to lunch. Ask
Something's
questions. Ask questions. So he actually pitched me a management job with a great firm, and I said yes. I was something I'd always wanted to do. Wasn't actually on the radar, like all good things, but it was something that people in my family had all done. My mom and dad had managed offices, and I felt that it was a learning experience that I needed to understand. And I will tell you that when I did the management role, I reflected back of my time as an agent. I realized what a good agent I was for my broker because I didn't ask a lot of questions. I kind of figured that if there was a question, I needed to go find the answer, but I didn't bother my broker with it all the time. And I think that was my mistake. I should have relied on the people that I paid to support me. And, I kind of learned that lesson once I was the broker supporting others. And so I kind of kept that as my ideology, provide the support they're looking for, be on hand, because if I can't help you close that deal, what value did I bring? And I think that it's important that I'm accessible, that I provide clear value, that I answer my phone, that I return my calls, same things I would expect from others. Mm-hmm. And that's what I always try to bring to anyone I work with.
And you managed a couple different offices from him different times, right?
I did. I managed their Green Valley office, which was a fantastic location, great group of people. And then, funny enough, I lived in the Northwest and went to commute to run a Green Valley location in Henderson. So I commuted for about 9 months. And then, like all good things, I wanted to change. So I said, well, let me go to the other side where I was from, back to the Northwest. And so I commuted the opposite way for about 9 months. And the difference is, though, at the same time my father-in-law was commuting for his job and he commute about 50 minutes each way, my worst day, even with rush hour, is going to be about 25 to 30 minutes. So that's one of the best things about Vegas, too, is currently our rush hour isn't too bad, but it's getting there.
It depends on where you go.
Yeah,
I think you've been here for a long time. You know all the back roads.
Used to say like 10 to 15 minutes to go from one side down to the other. Not anymore.
Yeah. I live on the Strip, kind of Sahara and Las Vegas Boulevard. I can get here 15 minutes in the morning. It takes me almost 50 minutes to get home.
Wow.
So traffic is changing,
Yeah.
And I notice different times of the week it gets busier.
Yep.
So how long did you manage total over there?
I was in management about almost 7 years.
Wow.
When it all came back around. And my job responsibility was to manage, coach, and mentor the agents in the office, to recruit, to plan the training events and train the agents. A lot of it was done in roundtable sessions, masterminds, formal classes, CE, and all of that on top of anything else that I would do as far as the staff management of the office and things like that.
What do you think is the biggest thing missing from a traditional brokerage now in the way of support?
I think it's probably the opposite, if I were to point it out, is a lot of companies provide a lot of tools that agents aren't prepared to utilize. And I know we've talked about that in our time together and on the board, is that we always try to provide the best value possible, and the agents that we're providing it to sometimes don't get it, or they're not ready to use it. It's hard for some agents to use the copy machine. Mm-hmm. And I know my mother's laughing wherever she's at watching this video, but sometimes that's the hardest task they have in the day. And I think that it just needs to be simple. I don't need a lot to do my real estate business, but I need the basics. And the basics are the ability to access technology in a way that I can relate to it. I started out in the business and smartphones were not even around. And that sounds funny to say 15 years ago, but they weren't. And I remember seeing agents still had beepers. I mean, the simplicity of a beeper, right? You would wear it with you, it would buzz off, and you call the number that was there, right? And now you think about all the things you can do on your smartphone and how far we've escalated from that. And there are still agents say, well, I don't really have any technology. It's crap. You got a ton of technology.
Right there in your hand.
Yeah. And I mean, every day there's a new app or a new process or a new system that I can utilize to make it a little bit easier. But the problem is that most overcomplicate it. They use 5 apps when one was simple enough. And I think that for most agents, they just need to simplify their lives. Whatever you can put in systems for, do it now. Even a simple system of reading your emails, setting up rules so that this email goes to this place and you know where they're at and you store them right. I can't tell you how much time I've spent helping an agent find an email that they deleted by mistake. It's usually an offer that I sent them, but still,
That's why you helped them pick it up.
That's why I helped them do it.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a good point, though. I mean, if you're in the office all the time and add office administrator or whatever, you understand how to use the copier.
Yeah.
It's simple, but somebody coming in, it's a new tool.
It's a new tool.
Yeah.
It's the simple thing of where things are located and can I ask this person, is it okay if I interrupt them, and how do I interrupt somebody? I've spent years on the management side and years on the staff side, and I've had the agent follow me to the bathroom and not leave. But I understand, because the fact is that it's critical for them. That one piece of information is critical to closing that deal and getting paid, because they don't get a weekly paycheck or a monthly paycheck. However, respect is respect. And I think that's why, the golden rule is the preamble for everything that we do as a realtor, is that treat others how you'd want to be treated. Mm-hmm. And I think that you just need to carry that with you. And as long as you're doing that and give someone a chance to answer. My wife runs a transaction management company, and the one thing she says is, someone will send me an email and then they'll call me right after they sent the email to ask me if I got the email. And I probably am the one doing that. But the whole idea is that, give people a chance to respond and make it simple.
Yeah, I love it, because we all get overwhelmed with emails,
Absolutely.
Text messages, stuff like that. And I just told somebody this last week, and I said, I get so many texts, it's hard for me to reply to them all. So that person sent me an email today and then followed up with a text.
Well, the other thing is, I usually answer my phone up till 9 o'clock at night, because I understand that if you're calling me at 9 o'clock at night just to have a conversation, you and I are going to have a problem. Right? Not you and I, but you can call me at 9 o'clock at night. Go ahead. But if you're doing that with no good reason, you probably need to check the systems you have in place. I really think that ideology of, your issue does not constitute my emergency. Yeah. Because usually that's because you failed to plan something out. And I understand that things happen. I understand that issues happen that you're not prepared for. Breathe. The worst thing an agent can do is overreact, because if you overreact in a situation where it's a critical part of the deal or something's going south and you just start flying off the handle, you've just caused an even bigger problem than when you started with. And a lot of times all you need to do is calm down, step back and reflect and say, what are 3 solutions to this problem? And people usually will make good decisions when they're presented with good answers. I mean, that's all it really takes.
Right.
And
one of the reasons you hire a realtor is because they're not emotionally attached to the process.
Well, you would hope not.
But then most agents get emotionally attached to the process. And I think that's a lot of the conflict between agents and even with their clients is they don't take they react rather than respond.
They do. And you what you said is so important, because the reason I hired my realtor is because of their expertise to solve issues, right? And we really are a concierge. I mean, you're coming to me because you need a menu of services to help you get from point A to point B with the least amount of headache, with the least amount of loss. And my job is to provide you with a lot of answers and options. And I think that a lot of the times agents try to answer their clients' problems and they take them as their own. That's not what they hired you for. They hired you to provide solutions, right? I want to buy a house in Summerlin for $500,000 with a pool. That's a problem in itself. But the solution is that there may be something that I could do. There could be a new development. There could be a new property. There could be a reseller, a foreclosure. Who knows what it is? But my opportunity to go out and investigate the marketplace and find those things, or present them with the data that it's not there in a way that they understand, that's the answer to the problem. Right. And I think a lot of times, like you said before, is that agents, try to take it on and just reply and just respond. And they get so wrapped up in it, just calm down.
Right. And they make decisions for their clients.
Yeah. Can't do that.
No.
That's when you get sued.
Right.
Yeah.
You explain the pros and cons and let them make the decision, but it's always the client's decision.
My father teaches a lot of classes, and he gets so giddy when he talks about taking the monkey of liability off of his back. And it kind of always has resonated with me, is the fact that when you make decisions for your clients, you now take over the liability for your clients. When your clients make decisions and they confirm it in writing and you presented them with the option, I love to do it as a broker where I go back to the agent and say, okay, here's the situation that we see happening. And by memorialize it in writing, everyone can see it. It's clear, it comes away clear to everyone. And here are 3 things I could suggest that you could do. What are your thoughts on them? And by letting them the opportunity to respond, you now give the client the power.
Right.
And that's what they want to return back to. They want to know that Chris gave me options. He helped me come to a solution, and he was always there for me. I mean, that's why people will give me repeat business. And they have, for that reason.
One of the other issues I see with agents dealing with their clients in that experience is that when a client says, hey, I want to go in low on a price or that, they really talk them out of that instead of just explaining the pros and cons, doing what they asked.
Yeah.
And what I find is even if you get them the house because you talk them into coming a little closer to the list price, then that client's going to turn around and go, I still could have got it less.
I can't tell you enough how many times I had to learn this lesson the hard way. And I had an investor that literally put an offer in on any property. He didn't care where it was, what it was. He'd put an offer in. It wasn't a good offer. But every once in a while, on a scenario that I thought would never happen, he'd get the offer accepted. And the whole thing was, my original point was that I'm a salesman. I don't make any money unless I sell things. And so if I just put into front of somebody that this is never going to happen, how do I know? I don't know what position that seller's in. I don't know what position that buyer's in. My job was to bring the parties together, right? Mm-hmm. And so I need to paint a picture of reality. Okay, the last 3 houses sold for X. Why would anyone sell it for Y? But you never know. And I think the point is, if there's a client that's so out there and so crazy and so off the wall, why are you working with them to begin with?
Right.
You can find that out by pre-qualifying the client. But if it's close and they're just like, hey, Chris, we want to buy this house and we want to see if they'll take 10% less, then I always go to the side of, okay, I just want to make sure I'm happy to write up the offer. I just want you to understand the comps. And by the way, if you wake up tomorrow and this house is not going to be yours because it went to somebody else, are you going to be okay with that? And if their answer is yes, what option do I have? But usually it's, well, my wife has already placed the couch and the kids have already picked their bedroom. Okay, so you really want a chance losing the property over this?
Right.
And you move them through those steps. It usually works out pretty well.
Just an education process. Yeah. But you're the one that has to keep a clear head and walk them through it.
And don't be condescending. I see that a lot, that agents become condescending or personal to the client. You're not going to get any repeat business that way, You want to keep it as positive as possible and paint it in a positive light. I'm just trying to help you understand. And I think the other side of it is, too, a lot of times that client, when they see that or they felt the agent didn't really do everything they could for them, there's not a lot of documentation in the file. There's not a lot of proof that comps were run or proof that you ran comps before you wrote the offer. I mean, why would you set yourself up to fail? Before I take any listing, I'm going to run the comps to tell the seller what I think the value is. And if they're going to list it at a higher price, I'm going to set a process for how we're going to reduce it. Because I know it's not going to sell at that price, but here's the process we're going to lay out to get the price reduction. It's exactly what I said it would be. And then if I'm going to write the offer below market, at least I have comps to show that they were crazy to begin with, right? But here's the process to help them understand when we see multiple offers or something like that. I think just set yourself up for success.
Yeah. Well, the neat thing here is I can tell you've got a lot of experience in the industry and you know what you're talking about.
Some days. Tell my wife.
Some days. Well, I believe in you so much, and I'm excited. If you haven't heard yet, Chris has actually joined Signature Real Estate. It's been, a week now?
A week now. I'm very excited. Great company. You've built an amazing team here. And I told Janet when I came over, one of the things I noticed is that her year as president of the board, they'd have an event and you would see the tables of Signature agents that were there with them and the love and respect that they had for each other. And they're just a great support group. And it's definitely evident when you're here in the offices. You can feel it and see it, and a great group of people.
I really believe we have the best agents in the Valley. Not that the other agents are bad. I just think as a group together, we're all stronger and everyone is like-minded.
Sure.
But when I say Chris has joined us, he hasn't joined us as necessarily an agent. He's actually come over to be our new general manager of Signature Real Estate Group here in Las Vegas, and also currently managing the Southwest office as well.
I'm super excited. And, you talk about it, that the best agents in town. And I think, what does it take to make the best agents? It's actively involved people that care about each other, that want to run a good business. And I think that that is a bedrock principle that you have shared that you feel is important to you, is that everyone feels that they're included. And I think that, when you come into the offices, again, when you meet the staff that's here, when you meet the management team that's here, it's an incredible management team, but they're all personally vested to help every agent succeed. And I think that's what makes it an incredible place to work. And I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, so we have a thing, and that's the name of this podcast is a Signature Life podcast. Yep. But our thing is the Signature Life, and it's more than real estate. It's about having a lifestyle and enjoying what you do and loving the people you work with.
Yeah.
And so part of our initiative through this show and some of these other videos we're doing through Signature Life Media is to get to know the agents outside.
Sure.
And so really look forward to kind of getting to know you a little bit more and actually finding out what your true hobbies are. Maybe looking at some of your antiques.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know family's important to you.
It
so
is.
You've got a wife, and how many children?
I have my wife, Amy. Most people in the business know her before they know me. She runs an incredible transaction management business that she does and puts up with a lot of agents. My daughter, Madison, is our youngest. She's 11. Our oldest daughter, Brittany, also works in my wife's transaction management business. And our middle daughter, Chelsea, does as well. Chelsea has 3 little boys, all under the age of 6. So if you can imagine that.
You're a grandpa.
Yeah, technically. It's cool, the business that I've chosen. I don't think that many people, and you hear it all the time. I actually just got asked last week to go to a youth career fair that they're going to put on and show kids, careers that they can do. And they said, "Oh, would you be willing to come and, talk about real estate?" And I think that a lot of people, they set out in college, they have a goal. I'm going to be a doctor or a nurse or a veterinarian or whatever it is. And, it's a lot of school for a lot of work. And, with real estate, there's no limits. I can be as non-productive or as productive as I want, and no one sets my thresholds. I set it. I can make as much money as I want. I can work the hours that I want. But again, if I don't work and I don't set up my schedule and I don't set my accountability and I don't do my activities, I'm going to make no money. So I'll be out of the business. But
so it's good and bad.
It's good and bad. But the good part is, if you're that person that works 60, 70 hours a week and you enjoy action and activity, you can make anything you would ever want in real estate. And I think that every high producer I've ever seen, they have that one thing in common, that, they treat it like a job, they treat it like a business, and they got a plan.
And I'm not going to lie to you. When I started telling people that Chris Bishop was coming over, they go, "Oh, Amy's husband?"
Yeah, exactly.
But I always tell agents too. I said, when you had a previous job before this, they told you when to go to work, right? And they told you when to eat lunch, and they told you when to go home, and they told you what to do during the day, right? Yeah. And what happened when you did those things?
You got paid.
You got paid. Yep. So I'm telling you to do the same damn thing here, and you'll get paid.
Well, and the funny thing is, I've interviewed a lot of agents through the course of my management time, and a lot of new agents come in with the look on their face like, they're waiting for me to hand them the paperwork for payroll and the insurance information and stuff, and it doesn't happen in our business. You just created your own small business, and while startup costs for a real estate business are only around $3,000 or $4,000, which is pretty inexpensive. I always make the analogy that if I were going to go open a Subway and I was going to give them $50,000 or $100,000 to start the business, that's a huge investment, right? And you would do everything to protect that investment. And then like Subway, when I'm putting my sandwiches together, they have a set process that you go through. You start with the meats and the breads and you go on to the condiments and the cheeses and everything else, but it's the process that unfolds, and it's been put there for you because it's that simple. Our business is that simple. It's just not easy. It's that simple to come in every day, to make my phone calls, to contact people that wanna. I'm gonna talk about it tomorrow in our sales meeting. And the whole goal is if I don't come in and do that, if I don't make the contacts, I'm not gonna have anything to eat.
Right.
And I think that for most agents, not to get too deep in analogies, they literally don't think that they're starting a business. They think that they're gonna show up here, a buyer's gonna walk through the door and they're gonna show them 3 houses and they're gonna pick one. It's not like it is on HGTV, right? It just doesn't work that way. It's a hard job that takes a lot of work, but it pays very, very well.
Especially if you're structured and disciplined.
Exactly.
So what advice would you give to somebody considering real estate?
Don't take it for granted. You are starting a career. When my mom got into real estate, she was a single mom at the time. Ended up meeting my dad, having me, was working as a dealer at the Dunes. You remember the dunes?
I've seen
Have you
pictures.
seen pictures? Yeah. So
All that stuff all the cool stuff was gone before I got here.
So back in the 80s, she was a dealer at the dunes and one of the first women dealers on the strip. And of course, she was pregnant with me, and you imagine me there. And she was dealing cards and working a real estate business. I mean, you couldn't think of a harder thing than a pregnant mother working an 8-hour shift and then going and selling houses, right? But she knew that she had to do something to bring in that type of income to give her family the life that she wanted. And I think that it's that hard work and tenacity that has to come from you. And I love the reference to grit. It's the gritty people, the gritty agents that are going to jump in and work it as hard as they can, and they're going to get the lifestyle they've always wanted. I always love these things that you see in the infomercials late at night on TV, you know, where it's this guy on a cruise ship or his own boat and with all his cars outside of it. No one's going to give you a get-rich-quick scheme that's going to work. It's just not going to work unless you work at it. Mm-hmm. And with real estate, it's not a get-rich-quick thing. It's where I come to work, I do my activities, and I meet people. It takes time to learn what to say. It takes time to learn how to overcome objections. And it's even longer when you don't have a good mentor or coach to teach you through it. And so that's why it's important more than ever that you find a company that's going to mentor and train you so that you don't spend 9 months making a mistake that's going to end you out of the business. Right. And 50% of the agents, as you know, that come into the business every single year don't make it to the end of the year. 80% don't make it to the end of 3 years. So, I mean, that's massive turnover, and it's because they don't treat it like a business, they don't have the grit to succeed, and they don't have a plan.
A low
so
entry
get one.
barrier.
And $3,000 in a heartbeat, and you can come on and join us. Right? But the whole thing is, you're probably not going to be successful until you really treat it like a business.
Well said. And so what kind of advice would you give to somebody that's an experienced agent maybe going through a slump?
Yeah, I kind of have always liked to refer to myself a little bit, as the share of real estate. I've recreated myself a few times in 15 years. And for agents that have been in the business 30 years, they've recreated themselves many times. Like we said previously, the market up or the market down, people still have to have a place to put their stuff. Right? And it's either they're going to put the money that pays for that place in their pocket or someone else's. And there's a number of reasons why it's a good idea to put it in your own pocket. There's a number of write-offs and why financially that makes sense. But the whole idea is there's always an opportunity. And as a seasoned agent, stop focusing so much about what other people are saying or what the market is saying. Go out and sell houses. Come in every day and do your activities and tasks and learn to evolve. I mean, that's the hardest part, is that you read the newspapers and you hear about the economy and you look at your retirement account and you think it's never going to happen. I'll never succeed. You're right. But if you come in and you think, wow, this will work out, as it always does for those that work at it, in every one of those markets, we've seen examples of high producers that made it work. The difference between you and them is the difference. Did they work it like a business, and did you work it like they did? There was a video series I watched a while back that talked about two things. I don't want to give up another sales meeting topic, but it's a good one. It talked about the 1% rule. And it talked about the fact that if every day I come into my real estate business or my life or anything else, and I can generate 1% better, I can make one thing that I do 1% better, and I do that for 100 days, I'm 100% better. I do it for the entire year, I'm 365% better. But the whole idea is most people come in and do the same things. Right. That's why they get bored. That's why they don't succeed. That's why they don't make it. And the other side was the easiest way to be successful is to find someone who's successful and copy everything they do, right? And if you can make those two things happen in a relatively easy frame and reference point, you'll be successful as well.
Okay, so next question would be, what do you think the biggest problem in our industry is today?
Ourselves. I think the biggest problem that we face, it's not an aggregator, it's not a disruptor, it's us. Agents tend to follow too easily. They tend to not ask enough questions. They tend to not seek to understand. And I think that none of these disruptors have put me out of business. I love the quote. I was at Inman about 3 years ago in New York, and one of the executives for Zillow got up on stage, and I can't remember if it was a he or a she, but the comment was, every lead generated online was the failure of a realtor to work their business. And I heard it, and it was like, the mic drop. Mm-hmm. And it just resonated so much that every lead that they sell to somebody else is the failure of someone who had a connection to that client that failed to call them. And if they would have just picked up the phone, or if they just would have implemented a system that made it easy, that lead would have never been paid for or had an opportunity to have been paid for, because the agent would have had such a control on their database. Now, real estate hasn't always been easy for me. There's been ups and downs. There's been market cycles that I've had to adjust to. But, my core group of clients is every time I've stayed in touch with them, cared about them and their family and kept them informed about the marketplace, they've always sent me referral business. And, it's the truth. If you just focus on the people usually will bring you through. So they just have to stop paying attention to all of the rhetoric and, believe in themselves.
So how big is your database?
Oh my goodness. So I've vacillated on this a couple of times. So when I first started out, I probably had about 50 people that were my core people. And ironically, remember that my entire family's in real estate. So if you want to know how hard it is to work a database, come from that angle, right? Because everyone that I initially would talk to was already working with a family member.
It's your mom's client?
No kidding. I had to go and tell them why not to use this person. So my first initiative was to work in my own part of the business. Hey, Mom, if this person's closer to me in the family versus you, can I get a small referral fee if I, help cultivate the lead and that kind of thing? So I kind of inched my way in there, somewhat. But when I first started out, my database was only like 40 or 50 people. And then it inched up to several hundred. And then I realized it kind of got too big for me and I didn't have a good system in play. So I kind of started over again. I think that your database needs to be living, breathing cycle. It needs to evolve as well. And so about every 6 months, I go through and clean out the people that haven't responded or haven't opened my emails or haven't talked to me. So I keep it average around 200. I'd love to have it at 400 that are good clients that I'm working with. And that's kind of my goal for the next couple of years. I spent a lot of time this last couple of years investing in my database. But, thankfully, every year on that 200, I've had about 10%, 200 people, 20 transactions that have come from it. That's all direct referral. That's money that I didn't have to spend on marketing or pay someone else to give me. It was just because I invested my own time and energy. Yeah. And it does take time. It does take time to make it happen.
That's pretty average, too. I mean, if you should get about 10% in closed transactions, whatever your database is. One of the big issues moving here is different from the market I came from in Salt Lake was down here it seemed like more of a one and done.
Yeah.
They were always on the hunt. The pro to this area was the fact that in Salt Lake it seemed like everyone did a deal or two a month. Here everyone was doing 5, 6. They wanted more and more and more.
Sure.
But they don't follow up with those, and like you said, that creates the opportunity for the Zillow buyers or the Zillow leads and all that other stuff to come into play.
I kind of found out a long time ago, and of course I've had people in my database, and if you don't track it, you're crazy for not doing it. But I go back and I look and I check their names in the tax records. I check houses that I've sold people. I try to do it on a quarterly basis. Sometimes it gets away from me, but every year I have 1 or 2 people that sneak one out and they go and sell their house with someone else. And every time I look at it as an investment I just made in myself to not do it again. And every year, of course, it happens again, but it happens less. And I think that it will happen because of your fault. It's no one else's fault but yours. And I say that not to be mean about it, but the fact that did you really do everything you could to secure their business? And mostly it's always been family members that usually do that to me. So, sometimes maybe I didn't do everything I could because I took it for granted that they would just call me, but it's my fault. And I think
take responsibility.
Yeah, take responsibility. I've had my database up where I've just taken a list of names and emails and just thrown them in and marketed to them. That's not really a database. That's a cultivation system, right? That's like a phone book. I could take all those lists of people and numbers and put them on a dialer, if I took the time. And once in a while, of course, I'm going to get somebody. I'll share one last story. I had a buyer's agent that worked for me, a really nice kid. And he just couldn't wrap his head around making his phone calls. And he was struggling because he wasn't making his calls, so he wasn't earning any money, right? Those two things go hand in hand. And so I literally went old school, and I pulled out a phone book, for those of you that remember what a phone book is. And I ripped out a page in the middle of the book, and I said, you're going to call both sides, every single number. If you don't, you're fired. And you won't be part of my team anymore. Because, of course, he's an independent contractor. I can't tell him he's fired from real estate, but I could tell him I wouldn't work with him. And so he says, well, are you serious? And I said, I'm dead serious. Go into that room, pick up your phone, call those people. And what's ironic is, on the phone page, I think it's 100 people on each side of the page, or probably more. He got 2 appointments out of it. And the funny thing was, he got the 2 appointments, set them, went on it, got one of the listings from it. And then the following week, he was back in my office, and he's like, man, I don't know what I'm going to do today. And so I went over and I ripped out another page of the phone book. But
You're
that's
in luck. I got some more leads.
that's the lesson, is that it only takes action on your part to make the business come.
Yeah.
That's the secret.
So what would be the biggest lesson that you learned from your mom?
Wow. I'm so proud of my mom and my dad, and they just, giving back to others, giving back to your business and your industry provides you with more than you ever think it could. And the lesson I learned from her is that what you put into something, you get back. And I hope that in 30 years, I'm still in a real estate office selling real estate, hopefully in a better position, but not title-wise, but income-wise. I would think that after years of cultivating a business, I've kind of gotten to the ideology that I'm creating something that has value. And a lot of agents don't look at their real estate business as something that they're building. They look at it just a database. I mean, how many times have you seen an agent retire from the business and just stop calling the people? And they just go off to Florida or their Caribbean island or wherever it is, and they never call those people again. And when you have a new agent that walks in the front door and all they're looking for is a base of people to connect with. And so I really have now committed myself to addressing my sphere of influence as a value system that I'm going to retire from, where someday one of my kids maybe, or a good friend or someone that I'm going to sell it to. I mean, there was a database just recently sold for $15 million from a team in Texas. And they sold it to another group that could use $15 million in annual income and great transactions and a great group of people. And that's what it should be. We have real businesses.
Yeah. Most people don't treat it like a business.
Not at all.
And that database, I like to call it your business. You're building a book of business.
You are. And the one thing I got from my mother, the numbers are important. I believe it or not, I'm an analytical. My mother's an analytical. We have spreadsheets and books and charts and graphs, and we look at those things and we write them out. Phone lists. I'm a big proponent of a phone list. But you look at those things every day and you realize they don't lie. The numbers never lie. And when you're able to track your numbers and be honest with yourself and what they really say, it's amazing what it'll do for your business. It really is.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really, when I've opened offices, I've sold franchises, and one of the things I've always told people is, if you're going to hire a broker that you'd work for. Yeah. And if you wouldn't work for them, then why are you hiring them? I would work for you. I'm impressed by what I know of you and everything, being able to work with you on the board and everything else. I remember watching you run, I think it was a treasurer's meeting, or towards the end, right before you didn't win the election, before you came back on. And
the dark times.
I looked and I went, man, the board is actually weaker that this guy isn't on there.
Yeah.
You know the rules, you know the process, and you run a good ship.
I appreciate
and
that.
so it was always great to serve with you on the board, and I'm really looking forward to being able to work with you here in the future and what we're going to be able to create. And now we're going to be able to take Signature to the next level. We've got big goals, and I know with you we can achieve them.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Very cool. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we'll start the podcast, and we'll do exactly that. Okay? All right.
Thank you for listening to the Signature Life Podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, please leave a review and subscribe. Don't forget to also follow us on YouTube and Facebook.